Welcome everybody. My name is Phil Wallace and welcome to the Martha's Vineyard Museum. You obviously know where you are. We're going to be having two individuals talk about their experiences and their perspectives around World War II. We're honored to have both Herb and Bob here. I'm going to tell a little bit about them. I'm sure you know them already. And also I want to thank Tom Bennett for helping kind of pull this all together. So who's a vet as well. So thank you very much. Yeah, come on in. So Bob Falkenburg, Robert, served as a first lieutenant in the 27th Infantry Regiment, the Wolfhounds, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. During World War II and the Korean War.
Well, actually, it was only in the Korean War that I was in that outfit.
In the Wolfhounds?
Yeah.
Oh, did you serve in World War II
yes,
as well?
Briefly. Yeah.
Briefly, okay. And Herbert Foster served in the headquarters company, 34th Infantry Regiment, 24th Infantry in Japan during World War II as a high-speed automatic Morse code radio operator. Wow. Is that correct, Herb?
And I have a picture of the book. We operated
that was your baby, huh?
Yeah, we didn't go like this. We operated a book.
Ah.
You see, I was a school teacher.
I know you were, yeah. And again, I want to thank you, Tom, for helping us out. Tom is Associate Executive Director for Community Services here on the island and is also a vet. And when did you serve, Tom?
During the 60s, from 65 to 69 in the Air Force.
Okay, well, thank you.
We got some other guys. A guy here served.
Vietnam.
Yeah, why don't we go around? Who
Yeah,
knows who served?
Yeah.
I'll get out of the way if
Yeah.
you conduct.
Navy's 1960s, active duty 66 to 68.
Okay.
I'm a baby, I guess. 81 to 86 Navy.
What kind of an outfit?
I was ammunition ship, USS Santa Barbara.
Wow, if you got hit, you would have really.
And it was really good.
Bob Tankard, 64 to 67 United States Army.
Yeah. Now Schultz is back there somewhere. Yeah, he's
Go ahead.
Hey, Paul.
72 Tom Destroyer in the Navy.
Paul Schultz, 68 to 70, Vietnam artillery.
Bruce Marcos, United States Marine Corps, 74 to 77.
Peter Filer, 67 to 71, Air Force, Aircraft Control and Warning, Vietnam, Da Nang, and ended up as a Mars radio operator.
I probably should just mention my son's out there right now. He's at sea on the USS Philippine Sea, which is a guided missile cruiser, CG-58.
Yeah.
And he's an ensign, graduated in Annapolis.
Yeah. Wow.
David, did you serve in that?
I did Dave Derby, chaplain in the Air Force from 1998 till last September.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Wow.
Robert Thornhill, Air Force in and out from 1954 to 1969.
Wow. Got a lot of vets around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Herb and Bob. And don't drink too much of the water.
Question.
Go right ahead. Yes.
If we really get going, can we stay beyond 6:30?
A little bit. I mean, the lights don't go out right at 6:30, but
Get very cold.
what's that?
All right, since I'm
Oh,
young.
one thing. Before you go, if you have time, right before the lights go out, there is an exhibit right here in the community gallery. A couple of you went over there. It's an oral history exhibit that Lindsay Lee, our oral historian for 30 years,
Wow.
yeah, close, has collected. And sadly, but I suppose obviously, the individuals there, the last of which just perished, Nelson Bryant, But these are the stories of the men and women that served in the armed forces, and these that are from the Vineyard. So take some time. If you can't today, it's coming down Friday, so I encourage you to see it. Okay, onward.
You lead over. Yes, sir. Now, one of the things, if you never served, he was a first lieutenant, I was what's called a T5. So if I salute him, I have to hold the salute until he puts his hands out.
That's right, that's right.
And so I have to do it. Another thing, too, maybe we could start off, I don't know about other vets, but I speak for myself. The U.S. Army now, if you're an Army veteran and the flag is going by or Star Spangled Banner, you don't have to put your hand over your heart. You are allowed to salute. And I'm getting teary-eyed right now. Why is it when I salute, I get teary-eyed? I have no idea. I'm not a psychiatrist.
That's probably,
And when we march in the parade.
probably because you're my friend, because I weep at anything.
Anyway, for you that didn't hear me, in 1976, I listened to... This one?
This one here.
Oh, okay, I know, yeah, okay. Yeah, 1976, I took the swine flu shot, and my right vocal fold is paralyzed for life from that. Some of you who were around in 76 may recall people paralyzed worse than I. Many were killed, and finally the whole operation was called off. So it was this last year that I took my first flu shot. Since then. But I've managed. I even had bragging, even had my own show on NPR in Buffalo with this voice. So anyway, I'll talk a little about I almost come from a family of military. My father was in the AEF in France in World War I, and Joanne Murphy, God bless her, got me his World War I Victory Medal. And we found out he had been in a battle there. My older brother Jerry was wounded fighting with the 85th Infantry in Italy and ended up in Korea, head of the Red Cross for a regiment of the 25th Infantry. So I came from a long line of that. The shooting stopped in August of 45. I turned 18 on January 31st of 1946. I went to NYU, I'm a Brooklyn boy. I went to NYU for 1 week, took a leave, and on February 20th I enlisted in the U.S. Army. Then you can enlist for a year and a half. And that's what I did. I enlisted for a year and a half. And for some reason, those of us who served also in 1946 are World War II veterans. So when we were mustered out, if you went overseas, you got $300. If you never went overseas, you got $200. The GI Bill was something where you got a year of schooling plus your time in the service. But a year of schooling was not 12 months because college was 8 or 9 months for the year. If you had a disability, you could go under Public Law 17, which meant you can go continually till you finished what you were doing. When I was at Fort Monmouth, I played football for Fort Monmouth, and we went up to play West Point Plebes. And there were no nose guards in those days. You played offense, defense, and they broke my nose. And I tried to get a pension, but it didn't work. Anyway, I enlisted in the Army, enlisted in the U.S. Army, and went to basic, then you take a test, AGCT, I think, Army General Classification Test.
Yeah, AGCT.
And it's all sorts of things, plus there's some dots and dashes in it. So I must have done well on the dots and dashes. Anyway, I went to Camp Crowder in Joplin, Missouri for my basic training. And I loved it. I was a good athlete and could shoot well and all that kind of stuff. But I want to also mention some of the racism and other kinds of things that we faced. I'm a Jewish boy from Brooklyn, and every payday, we regular Army guys got paid first. Then the draftees got paid. And I'm a 122533049. Still remember it. And every payday, a whole bunch of guys would scope me out. And finally, I said, "What the hell are you guys looking at?" And they were from the South, Southwest. They had never seen a live Jew.
Wow.
And they were, I'm a Scout's honor. I'm still in the Boy Scouts, by the way, 80 years. And they had never seen a Jew, and they were looking for my horns and my tails. My black friends who served in Great Britain told me the Brits would come up, touch their backsides looking for their tails. So we faced a lot of racism or religious law stuff. I'll get back to, I'm on a kick with this right now. What was I going to say? I forgot. Anyway, I was at Camp Crowder, Missouri, did basic training there. Then I went to Fort Monmouth in in basic training, just a quick story. Another one, I got everything. See, I was a teacher and professor. Here's my high school track team from Manhattan, every color, every religion, every race. And my major letter, I got a P. I was in track and softball. Anyway, I had this picture on the inside of my foot locker. And some of the Southern guys went crazy. I was in a segregated army, and we got into great arguments about blacks. In those days, we used the word colored or Negro. And what was interesting, once I knocked down every one of their arguments about blacks, you know what's the last thing they said? Would you let your sister marry one? That was the last part of their argument.
That was the clincher, huh?
That was the clincher. And I would say, "You're such a dumb son of a, I don't have a sister, but I let her marry anyone but you." And that's some of the stuff you faced in the armed forces in those days, and probably other days as well. Anyway, then I went to Fort Monmouth, did my basic training, and the Army in its brightness realized by the time we finished our Morse code radio operator courses, our enlistment would be up. So they sent us overseas, which was great. Now we went over on troop ships. Today the guys and women fly you all over. We went over on troop ships.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah, and with my buddy, I can't remember the name, Jay and Tom, we wrote a book about Martha's Vineyard in World War II. And I describe being on a troop ship. The moment we went underneath the bridge in San Francisco, I was sick for 3 days. 3 days. Oh, what a terrible feeling it was.
Very rough there.
Pardon me?
It's-
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, we ate standing up. The third day, I finally felt great. And the ship goes like this. The guy here goes, "Yep," and I go, "Oop." It was terrible. Anyway, we went over on ships. I went over as part of I was assigned to the 24th Signal Company, and they needed volunteers in the infantry, so I volunteered, and I was in Headquarters Company, 34th Infantry Regiment, 24th Infantry Division. I was in Sasebo, Japan, and in those days, an infantry division had 3 regiments. Each regiment had 3 battalions. Our 3 battalions were in Nagasaki. I went there once, but I went to Hiroshima a number of times. And we did our thing there. We never worried. The only time I got shot at, I got something here, so, I'm a Jewish boy. All the armed forces in Japan who were Jewish. We went to Kyoto for Passover Seder. And I still have mine, what they gave us. And the date is, we were in I-Corps, I didn't even know it. There's a date here. Could you see if you... Anyway, we're on the train going up to Kyoto, and someone says they're shooting at us. So by then I had turned 19, so I was the old guy. So we turned out lights and everyone got down, and I have no idea whether we were really being shot at or not. So that was that. And then I went back, after discharge, I went back to NYU, did my college and undergraduate degree in three years.
You probably falsified this because there's no date on this.
There is. Yes, sir. There is a date. It was in 1947. Something.
Oh, wonderful.
Anyway, I did NYU in 3 years, going summers, thanks to the GI Bill. Without that, I would not be here. And then I went down to re-enlist. I have no idea, but I wanted to move to a small town. I was a shop teacher, graphic arts. Went down to re-enlist, and the sergeant said, let your discharge go through. You're graduating with an undergraduate degree in about 2 weeks. Re-enlist and you'll get a commission. The day I was discharged from the reserves, the Korean War started. So I never re-enlisted. However, my regiment was, I believe, the first one into Korea. And what else have I got here?
A lot of stuff.
Yeah, I got lots of pictures of me and about listening, going to Kyoto. And let me show you some of this stuff. This is the World War II helmet. And there are two parts to it. This is the part you adjust to your head so it fits. And then this. Now, the helmet was used for everything. You could cook in it, you could drink in it.
Right? You could bathe in it.
And if you were in a foxhole, you could defecate into it and throw it out or urinate. So that was our helmet in World War II. And Bill Malden, who was a great cartoonist,
Right.
did some great cartoons about the helmet. Yeah. This was our cup, and inside is this. Same thing from, I have one from World War I. I have one from World War I. Same thing. It's a 2-pint little cup. Now, show you what I was, such an innocent kid. In basic training, I'd go to the PX every night and fill it with ice cream. The guys would have what they call 2.5 beer. Whatever the hell that is, I have no idea.
There's a low percentage of alcohol.
And then we would see movies about VD, venereal disease. And there was one, it was almost funny. It was a picture about this guy who messed up and he couldn't go out on a pass for the weekend and his girlfriend was coming down. So his buddy takes his girlfriend out. And then after someone's shaking his head, and then at the end of the movie, you see the guy who took his girlfriend out sitting on his cot like this. And he says, but she looked so clean. If you had guys in combat, usually had K rations. And the K ration box was something like, what do they call it? I forget. But it was only about this big. And it had cans, and in it, in World War II, we had what was called the P-38, an outstanding fast fighter plane with a double boom. And then we had a P-38, which is a little can opener.
Yeah.
And there's a P-38, and it came with every K ration or C rations, remember them?
Yeah, yeah.
And most guys would have a little P-38 on their dog tags.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, we had dog tags that had a couple of things, had our Army identification number, our religion, and if you were Jewish, which I was, it had H for Hebrew. And that went way back to World War I when they figured the designations. And it had your blood type. I was O, which meant if I were hurt, I could take any blood type. Do you remember what your blood type was?
Yeah, AB.
AV, whatever that is. And then we had a
It's
belt.
rare.
Yeah. We had a belt we would wear. I could never get this around me today. And all these things hooked onto it. I served. It was an adventure and an ego trip for me. I was a kid from Brooklyn. Hey, I played football for Army. Played West Point a couple of games. Went overseas. By the when our regiment got to Sasebo, the 2nd Marine Division was there. So they left and we came in and we played. I'm talking about now, I was never in combat. We were talking about, I always have felt guilty about that. And I remember talking to Ted about it, who's gone now. And Ted said, Herb, you served, that's all that counts.
Right,
That's what he do, all that counts.
right.
I forgot what I was going to say. Why don't I shut up for a while and you take over?
All right. Okay. Oh. I want to start off with the fact that you're having a birthday coming up,
Yes.
and the day that he has his birthday, for a brief period of time, Herb and I will be the same age. And I forget what was is it 29? Is that
My
what our
birthday.
age was? No, we're not 29.
No, I'll be 91,
Oh,
92.
92, oh yeah, okay,
And
92.
you're 93.
All right, not 29. Yeah. Now, a quick deal from me, because I didn't come with notes. And I'm going to start off in my childhood. I skipped the 3rd grade, and that's significant because it put me a year behind all the kids that I went to school with. When I played football, I played my last year of football when I was 16.
What position?
Well, it was single wing, and
That's what I played.
Well, I played right end on offense and left tackle on defense, and I weighed 150 pounds.
I weighed 164.
All right, there you go. So, in any event, because of the war, everything was changed around, and so I wanted to get into service, but they would only take you on active duty when you were 18. And I was 17 when I graduated high school, and that's the day I enlisted. So I had to work a job until they would take me on as a regular guy. So when I finally got on active duty, I lived in Jersey, and you never knew where you were going or what you were doing because they didn't tell you. And so after we were there for a week or so, or at least for me, we took a train, and when we got off the train, we were at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And that was armor with the tanks and everything. And so I was in armor. And we drove every vehicle that the Army had, started with, we started with the Jeep, then we had a 3/4 truck, 1.5 truck, a deuce and a half truck, all these trucks, and then we had the half track, which had tracks on the back and regular wheels on the front, and try to steer that bugger. That was wicked. And then the last thing that came to you were the tanks, and the tanks were driven by 2 upright things here, and you steered with these, and they were brakes, and they worked by stopping a track on one side and letting the other track so you could turn, and so on. And then you get blisters on the palm of your hands because they were shift, and when you shifted those things, you had to push and push and push, and it finally would get in. And it was great fun driving those tanks. So, nevertheless, during the period of time that I was in my basic training, the company commander decided that I should apply to be an officer. And I'm the youngest guy in the whole place. And so I had to go through some more tests and everything. And I was approved to go to be an officer. And there were 3 guys in my company who were going to go to OCS. Myself, another kid, and then a man who was principal of an elementary school. And so at the drop of a hat, they would call us down to personnel, which was wonderful, because we would just goof off, everybody else, and that was when they had D&M, driving and maintenance with the tanks. You drove for 5 or 10 minutes, and you maintained for half of the day. And we would go to personnel during that period of time. And so we just goof off, go to the where you had your, what was it, the big, where you had pool tables and stuff like that. What do they call
Rec
it?
hall.
Huh?
Rec hall?
Yeah, but it was, well, anyhow, we would go there, and or sit at an idle field with nobody was doing anything. We just goof off. Well, nevertheless, when we finished basic, they took the 3 of us and made us temporary cadre, and the cadre would go stand on the back of a big tank and help the kids who came through and to show them how to fire the gun and all this kind of thing. And the beautiful part of that was, in our great organization in the Army, there was no such of a thing as ear plugs or protection for your ears. And so we stood on there all day long while they're firing the big gun. Boom, boom, boom. And by the time the day was over, you couldn't hear a thing, nothing. And we'd go down and we'd eat, and we'd go to a movie, and by the time the movie was over, we started to hear. And that's how it went when we were down there. The activity was very physical. Everything was, you had to do things the hard way. But then when it came time for OCS, I found out that basic training was nothing at all. We went down to Fort Benning, Georgia, because, the war ended at the time, the Second War. No.
August of 45.
Yeah. Well, that's when I got out of the Army then. Then I was called back for the Korean deal 3 years later. And the... let's see, how'd this work? I don't know.
They gave you a first lieutenant for coming back.
Yeah, no, they didn't. They didn't. I got my commission, before I got out, second John, and I had a friend of mine who said, "You know what a John is, and you're not even the first John; you're a second John." So that was a joke, but nobody got it. And so we. When I was going, you talking about getting sick on the boat? We had a troop ship, and and it's automatic when you leave the West Coast that you get sick because the water is it's really rough in that area.
Pacific Ocean.
And so I used to eat my beef rare, and they had steak this first night out, and so I ordered a rare steak, and it came, and I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker, and I'm standing there and I'm holding on, and the boat's going up and down and back and forth, and the food comes on the table, and I look at it, and I get my knife and fork, and I look at it, and I stick the fork in there, and the whole table goes, moo. And that was the end of it for me. I have no food. I went, and the only way I could stop from being sick was to get up on the deck where the wind was blowing and get some fresh air. So, but that was so bad. And I haven't had a rare steak since. Yeah. And so then we went over. Now when I enlisted as a kid right out of high school, and went to OCS after I finished basic training. And I was sent over to Korea in occupation. Korean War hadn't broken out yet, yeah. So I went over there, and we were stationed in Daegu, lovely town, and the country is beautiful, lovely, and it's known as the land of the morning calm, but it stinks, or it stank. I don't know about today. But in the old days, rice paddies were everywhere, and they had to fertilize them, and they used human waste, and it was just an overpowering thing. When the wind shifted one way or another, it was just impossible. But beautiful, yes, and clever, the people, yes, wonderful people. So then I went back home. And when I was, we were getting debriefed on the West Coast, and all the officers in this one room, and they said, "All right, anybody wants to get out, raise your hand." Boy, my hand was up, and there was an old guy standing right next to me. He was a major, and he said, "Now, son, if another war should break out, you don't want to go back as a private. It's get a commission, and you'll be a lot better off with a commission in active duty." So I put my hand down. 3 years later, there was another war, and so I went back in, and I was really wanting to go to OCS the first time because the armor OCS, when you went there from armor training, they graduated like 90% of the candidates. When I went to infantry OCS, they graduated half of the candidates. So I appreciated it when I got my commission because it was wicked tough, very, very physical. I always remember there was an exercise with a telephone pole, and you'd get a bunch of guys holding up the telephone pole over here, and you had to put it up and down to the side, and then you had to throw it in the air, and that was something, and being less than tall, it was tough to do that kind of stuff. And now I'm less than tall. I've lost about 3 inches already. And well, that's okay too. Now, quickly over to Korea. When I was there in occupation, as I said, it's strange. For example, in the city of Daegu, they had a brand new building, a theater, that they had built. A very modern-looking building with brick and everything. And when you went in, there was a sloping floor, but there were no seats. No place to sit down. Rice mats you sat on, woven little thing. But that was an example of I don't know what. Beautiful, great structure, and you come in and it's just an empty room with cement floors. And but we got through that. During that time, we had an outbreak. This was when the Chinese communists were running around. That's what caused the war in the first place. And so we had patrols, and because even though I was now in the infantry, when I was there in occupation, I'm doing the first time in now. We were riding patrols because the Chinese had started wrecking all kinds of. They had all of the power for electricity was north of the 38th parallel. And so they would turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, whenever they felt like it, and we never knew when we were going to lose power or when we didn't lose power. And so they took over Taegu, and we had a patrol in a couple of I think single 1.5 ton trucks. And we were patrolling the area, and these guys started acting up, and they killed a lot of people. And in the country of Korea, which, by the way, now has a very, very high ratio of Christian population, at that time, less than 2% of the population even knew what the word Christian meant. And so all of the casualties that took place, and this is during occupation, were tortured. Not one of them was shot cleanly or stabbed cleanly. They were all tortured. Pregnant women had their legs tied together and they were tortured. And it was a horrible, horrible time. And so I was glad to get out of there when I did. But now going back to the war, one of my favorite guys who, as president, was, what was the guy who was the haberdasher? Harry. Yeah, Harry Truman. Well, I liked him very much, but when he shut everything down for the armed forces, he shut everything down. And so when the Korean War broke out, we had all the World War II equipment. Some of the ammunition worked, some of it didn't work. Some of the weapons worked, some of them didn't work. And when we went to Korea to fight, we didn't have any winter clothing. And the weather there was just like the weather here. It gets cold in the winter. And it was crazy. So at the early part, it was very difficult, both fighting and trying to keep yourself together, because we didn't have the proper equipment, and we lost a lot of people because of that. But then after we got going, I used to sleep with my platoon sergeant. And we slept together to get warm. And it was like you and me, Melvin, because that's who it was. My platoon sergeant was of the black persuasion, and I was of the white persuasion. But we wanted to keep warm, so we kept warm. And It was crazy stuff going on. One day I was to take out a patrol. Now recognize I'm back on the regular infantry now. No vehicles. And we had a little hill that, well, it was an area, it was like a horseshoe. And there's mountains going here and around there, and it's open in the back. We're in the open end, facing the closed part of the horseshoe. And inside the horseshoe was a small little hill. And I was given the job, and how they think, it's unbelievable. I had I don't know how many squads that they gave me, but they wouldn't. Only one was from my own platoon, and all these other guys came from different outfits. So I had maybe 8 or 9 squads, but in support of us was a platoon of tanks, and a platoon of tanks, I think it's only 2 or 3 tanks, and they went forward ahead of us, and then sat abreast, and they were firing into this little hill, theoretically to keep the bad guys down, and so then we come along, and we have to climb up this little hill, and they're shooting all the time. And the deal is, as we walk up the hill, they're raising the elevation on the, and I'm getting down lower and lower and lower, trying not to stand up too high because I might get killed. And then we stop. We're getting, and I had this poor kid with the radio, WWII. I don't know if you know what a WWII radio is. It's about this high and that wide and this thick, and some poor little radio kid has to carry that on his back, and he was with me at all times. And so we got up, and we were told to halt where we were. And in Korea, there's no such thing as big trees, because they've cut them all down. I mean, they had to have something to burn when they were trying to heat themselves. So there were trees, but no trees like we know, not big. And so we had these trees that were about maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet high, and we're down there, and these guys are shooting over our heads. But then the guys who are in the 3 sides now, because this little hill is inside the horseshoe, right? So we got enemy on the left, enemy on the right, and enemy in front. And they are shooting. And I'm on the ground with my head sideways, and I'm getting needles in my face from the bullets that are going over my head that are hitting the trees, because the trees are right there. And finally, the word how able, which meant haul ass, and that was good news. And I have a loud voice, and that was the best thing I had in the infantry, was a loud voice. And so I'm yelling at these guys, and I'm trying to get them back down this slope. And at the bottom of the slope is a very small bluff that's about 10 feet high, maybe. And I'm putting them all there because I figured we have more protection there than we do any other place. Because we have to get out of there, and the tanks aren't any help. In fact, that's another story about the tanks. But I'm trying to get everybody so that we can spread out, because now they were throwing mortar fire at us. And at least when somebody's shooting a rifle or something, and it's horizontal to the ground, and you know where they're coming from, and you can sort of work that out. But when you're getting the stuff out of the sky, you don't know where it is, you don't know when it's coming. And so I'm trying to get these guys to spread out so they don't all get wiped out in one lump. And you have to bear with me here because you can't see small arms bullets. They go too fast, and they're too little. But during that time, doggone it, told you I'm a weeper. Anyhow, I saw a bullet, and I moved my head like this, and splat, right against the hill there. And so that happened. Yeah. And I'm ever thankful. But I had been planning to be a minister, and when I went to college, I was pre-thee. But it didn't work out, and but I figured I must have been protected for some reason. Anyhow, I'm
Tell
sorry to
How you
do
got
that.
home? What happened when you were in the Jeep?
When we rolled,
Yeah.
oh well, yeah. Well, that was in Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I busted my. Isn't that funny? I never got wounded, but I broke my ankle in a Jeep rolling down. The roads were all dirt in Korea, and I had a fellow with me, and we were taking a joyride to see a friend of mine, and so we were coming down a hill, and we came out at the bottom of the hill with a Jeep. Now, I don't know anybody who's ever ridden in a Jeep. It bounces up and down like a cork in the water. And so we came around this bottom of the hill, and there was a beautiful crater. And there was no place to go. And so luckily for us, we had the Jeep was we had stolen the Jeep. Not us. Somebody had stolen the Jeep. It was attached to my unit, and we were using this Jeep to go take a little ride to try to see some friends. But all regular Jeeps had no roof, But this had a canvas roof with the floppy canvas on it, and it had the crisscross holding the roof on. And that saved our lives, because when we hit this hole, there was no way we were going to do anything except roll down the pit. And we rolled down, but these crisscrosses obviously protected us. And I broke my left ankle. And I don't know what you call that. One of these bones just popped and broke off. And the kid with me broke his elbow. And we're sitting down at the bottom of because we were like on a railroad embankment, and it was a road, okay, when we came back. And that's why we rolled down on the side of this embankment. And so we're down to the bottom of that embankment, and we're moaning and groaning, and there's nobody around, but all of a sudden somebody starts coming along. And we yell, and they find us and everything. And so we were sent to the mainland. We didn't stay there. And and they shipped us off. So I left everything. We had nothing. No clothes, no nothing. After you go to the hospital and they work you over and everything. So you had to get new uniforms when we finally and we were shipped home because we were it was due for a rotation in that situation. But I couldn't do anything with this crazy ankle gone, and so that was the end of my trip in Korea the first time. Yeah, and the
Did
second
they give you a
time.
Purple Heart for it?
No, I didn't want any Purple Hearts. I didn't want anything. So anyhow, it worked out very well. I just can't, to go over there and fight and then you end up just being broken up because you got in a crazy Jeep. Anyhow, all's well that ends well.
We're part of the honor team that does military funerals.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob and another guy usually fire the M1 rifle from World War I to World War II.
Two.
And we laugh about it because when we were 18-year-old kids in the Army, I think the rifle was about 9.5 pounds.
Yep.
We would sling that around, not care anything. Well, we each, for two of us, will fire 3 rounds. And just lifting that rifle up, it feels like a ton.
Yep.
Yeah, it feels like a ton.
Murder.
And then we fire the 3 rounds.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I never thought about being a veteran until I moved to Martha's Vineyard. Everyone I knew in New York or Buffalo, wherever I lived, was a veteran. And I came here, and I don't know why, but I wanted to march with the guys in the July 4th parade.
Oh, my.
And that's when I started thinking about being a veteran. Now if you go to the July, well, I don't know how often they'll let me do it. But if you go to the 4th of July parade, you see my yellow Jeep. So as I age, they may not let me drive that Jeep in a parade with a bunch of guys. Yeah. But, it was a military experience here. We were 2 guys in the infantry. Bob was in combat. I wasn't. I was in the Army of Occupation, patrolling in Japan. And it's interesting how you never know where you're going to end up, what your assignment is. One guy or woman sits on their butt with their feet up on a desk, and someone else is having a horrible, terrible experience. So you never know, but you're sent different places and things happen.
Yep.
In fact, we were on the train, and we go by train in those days. We left where I enlisted by train. They were sending me somewhere, and we were halfway there, and someone said, "Oh, they came looking for you. They wanted to change your assignment." So I have no idea where I would have gone or what would have happened. But one thing about the armed forces, you meet people to some extent from all economic backgrounds, all kinds of educations, and it's really a mixture of doing it. And a lot of people survived. And on, around Veterans Day, I wrote this article that was in the Gazette. I don't know if any of you saw it. But we talked about things that we took from the armed forces into civilian life. Now, Bob, standing in the back, wrote about he will never leave the house unless every button is buttoned, and his shoes shine like a mirror. So we all learn different things. Now in basic training, infantry basic, you have a rifle, and if God forbid you call it a gun, you're in trouble. You have to walk around with singing a ditty, holding your rifle, and singing a ditty about, this is my rifle, this is for shooting, this is my gun for fun. And sometimes the sergeant will make you dig a 6x6 hole under the barracks. And then you come to the sergeant and say, we filled it, we're done, what should I do? Fill it up. So despite all of those kind of crazy things and experiences, overwhelmingly, a lot of men and women finished their armed forces experience, and it was a very, if you get the word, an experience that helped drive us through our lives. And there were some things we learned, like hurry up and wait. When we left basic training to go different places, we got down to the railroad station at 3 in the morning. The train came at 11 a.m. So it's all things, experiences, and guys go through it. And actually, if I had my druthers, I had my way, I would draft every boy and girl, and then a free undergraduate education. We could well afford it if the powers wanted to do it. And then you meet people who have served, and it's like a band of brothers and sisters. There's just a relationship that goes on. And I read the papers, when I'm a voracious reader of papers, different men are passing away, or women, or they had very important jobs, or served the government. Many of them, you will read, served. They put their time in, they served. They had certain experiences. They learned how to work as a group. They learned how to take orders. And one of the great things about the American Army in wars is that what we learned in basic training, it depends upon the terrain and situation. And so our men and women have been able, in the tough spots, to figure out how to do different kinds of things. Not necessarily like the Germans would wait for orders on top to make a move. So we had an experience, we did things, and maybe it was questions. Any questions? Or she wants something you want to share?
I just want to say thank you.
Oh. Well, he says thank you. My response is thanks for the GI Bill.
Yes.
When you were in Japan, did you see any of the survivors from the two atomic bombs?
No, well, I saw people. I was in Hiroshima was right on the railroad. So every time you went through Hiroshima, you should see everything. And it was just devastated, all over Japan. We had bombed the heck out of it. Every place was bombed out. But in Hiroshima, if the building was brick, parts of it were still standing. And the same with Nagasaki. But we bombed, never had a problem. I don't know of anyone who was ever attacked or anything. But at the same time, we were not allowed to fraternize. Now later on, I don't know what happened. Now, I'll give you an example how you never know. I had a friend here. I served in Sasebo down in Kyushu, southern Japan, in the boondocks, in the infantry. He was up around Yokohama and Tokyo in the artillery. He'd get a pass every weekend, and he'd visit all over. He hated the experience, and I loved the experience, so you never know. Well, let me share one experience with you. I wanted to get to Yokohama and Tokyo. So what I did is I hid my glasses, and the only place, you had to go to Yokohama or Tokyo to get an eye exam. And once a week, a Piper Cub would fly down with documents and go back. So I made all sorts of arrangements to fly to Yokohama and Tokyo on that Piper Cub. And then it was clouded up and I couldn't go. I went by train. Now, even that was interesting. In fact, I wrote an article about that. The train came, maybe 6 cars. 6 were for the Japanese, and people had live chickens, and then you had what they called, in Yiddish, pushy tushes. Tushy is a backside in Yiddish. People pushing the Japanese into the train. Now, my business friends who are businessmen and women tell me that happens in Africa in a lot of countries. So they would push them in, and then the train for the GIs, 2 or 3 guys. And instead of toilets, what the trains had was a hole in the bottom of the train.
Right.
A train and a bar, so you would squat and hold on. And that was a toilet.
But they had the holes without anything to hold on to.
So, and, you know, it's crazy. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you, Herb. Thank you.
Anytime.